Life on Earth is full of cyclical variations. We have day and night, the changing of the seasons, and the ebb and flow of the tides. Many of these changes happen over relatively short periods and can be predicted with precision. But other cycles affect our planet over larger intervals and can be trickier to forecast. Milankovitch cycles play a very important role in the occurrence of ice ages interrupted by warming intervals, but given the vast time scale, it's unlikely our own lives will be very much affected by them. Milankovitch cycles describe the collective effects of changes in the Earth's movements on its climate over thousands of years. The term was coined and named after Serbian geophysicist and astronomer Milutin Milankovitch in the 1920s. He hypothesized that variations in eccentricity, axial tilt or obliquity, and precession combined to result in cyclical variations in the intriannual and latitudinal distribution of solar radiation at the Earth's surface, and that this orbital forcing strongly influenced the Earth's climatic patterns. Another climate cycle that will affect you, which is called El Nano Southern Oscillation, also known as El Nano and La Nina. While El Nano and La Nina originate in the Pacific Ocean, their impacts are felt nearly everywhere on Earth, and by some accounts, the strongest effects are getting more common. In the last few decades, some of the destructive consequences have included flooding, drought, famine, and mass die-offs of marine life. Indeed, a severe El Nano in 1998 caused an estimated 16% of the world's coral reefs to die, kicking off a cataclysmic mass bleaching event that persists to this day. The El Nano Southern Oscillation is global and without a doubt, it will impact you. So, what are El Nano and La Nina? Why are they linked? And what are their global impacts? Join me today as we look at a fascinating climate cycle that became the stuff of legend centuries before we had the science to explain it. If you think the name El Nano sounds more like a folk story than a scientific phenomenon, it means you are onto something. During the 17th century, fishermen noticed periods of warmer water and poor fishing that would peak around Christmas time. They called it El Nano de la Navidad, which means the boy of the nativity or the Christmas child. It was not until the late 19th and early 20th centuries that scientists began to connect a variety of seemingly disconnected regional events scattered across the planet. By the mid-20th century, they found that these were not regional occurrences, but phases of a global cyclical phenomenon called the El Nano Southern Oscillation. The El Nano Southern Oscillation fluctuates with an average interval of 5 years, although the cycle can take anywhere between 2 and 7 years. We have now been tracking these cycles for decades, but they have been around for much longer than that. To understand why the El Nano Southern Oscillation occurs, let's first look at what happens in the Pacific Ocean under normal conditions. Winds blow along the equator from east to west. This is a product of the Coriolis effect, caused by the Earth's rotation. Here is a fun fact: if the Earth did not rotate, air would circulate north to south, from the high-pressure poles to the warmer, low-pressure region at the equator. As it happens, air does circulate off the poles, but it bends as it approaches the equator. In a circumferential band that extends 30 degrees north and south of the equator, sometimes known as the horse latitudes, air in the northern hemisphere deflects to the southwest, and air in the southern hemisphere deflects to the northwest. This channel of westward moving air is called the trade winds. It turns out they are not just important if you are a pirate living in the 18th century. As the trade winds blow westerly across the Pacific Ocean, they drag warm water from coastal South America towards Asia. And as this warm water moves west, colder water rises to replace it, a phenomenon called upwelling. This cold water is rich in nutrients that feed phytoplankton, which, in turn, support ecosystems of fish and everything that feed off them. So, as you can imagine, a shock to this system would have major domino effects on marine life. If this is what normal conditions look like in the Pacific Ocean, think of El Nano as a disruption of normal. During El Nano, the trade winds weaken. As they slow down, warm water that would be flowing toward Asia builds up instead of near the coastal America, resulting in less upwelling cold water. This, in turn, creates a zone of warm air and water further east in the Pacific. With less upwelling, the fish that feed off the phytoplankton migrate or die. The Pacific jet stream that crosses North America moves south from where it normally occurs. As a result, the northern United States and Canada tend to become warmer and drier, whereas the Gulf Coast and large parts of coastal South America become wetter. Peru and Ecuador receive their wettest months from April to October, and during more severe El Niño years, rain and flooding in those regions can be catastrophic. In the severe El Niño of 1997 to 98, devastating floods bombarded Peru, collapsing bridges and burying entire shantytowns under a meter-thick layer of mud. In total, 250,000 people were displaced from their homes. The region of Tums, which is normally arid, received an unbelievable 16 times its average annual rainfall. Outside the Americas, El Niño sets off a series of domino effects that significantly alters weather worldwide. The increased rainfall in South America typically coincides with a pronounced period of drought in South Asia and Australia. Severe famines have been recorded in India, and a delay in Australia's monsoon season can lead to massively destructive bushfires. Due to its vast expanses of grassland, Australia's bushfires are some of the most destructive on Earth, and there are already concerns about an event that could occur later in 2023. Leaders are understandably worried, given recent warming trends. You may remember that in 2020, in a non-El Niño year, bushfires wrought nightmarishly apocalyptic scenes that left 50 million acres of land charred to a crisp. Australia is a literal tinderbox over which El Niño looms like a proverbial flamethrower, so local officials are wise to prepare for the worst. On a global scale, the average surface temperature during El Niño rises 0.1 degrees Celsius. But not all El Niño events are severe, and some can be rather mild. Something to keep in mind before you hit the panic button. The average El Niño lasts from 9 to 12 months, but on rare occasion, they have lasted for years. The world's climate is a pretty complex system responding to a number of inputs. So, the effects of El Niño are best understood as relative to what the baseline would be, which is why two El Niño years are not alike. La Nina is the opposite side of the El Niño Southern Oscillation. If El Niño is a hot event, then La Nina is a cool one, although some regions do experience warming. As I mentioned earlier, El Niño occurs when the equatorial trade winds slacken, but during La Nina, the trade winds become even stronger. You can think of El Niño as a disruption of normal and La Nina as normal plus. The trade winds blow even more warm water from coastal South America toward Asia, resulting in more upwelling of cold, nutrient-rich water near the Americas. For fisheries, this can produce a feeding frenzy. And if you like salmon, well, you are in luck. During La Nina, cold water species, like salmon, will venture into typically warmer waters where they can't ordinarily survive. The same is also true of squid, in case you prefer calamari. Meanwhile, in Asia, the influx of warm equatorial water produces wet conditions, the opposite of the drought experienced during El Niño, causing a spike in tropical cyclones. In North America, the jet stream is pushed further north. This causes drought in the southwestern United States and rains in the Pacific Northwest. In 2022, La Nina exacerbated a mega drought in the southwest United States, making it the worst in 1,200 years. Just look at this image of Lake Mead, where the Hoover Dam is located. That light area is the so-called bathtub ring, ordinarily covered by water. Now, with all this talk of trade winds and jet streams, you might be wondering how La Nina affects hurricane season. Well, depending on where you live, the news is either good or bad. The Atlantic often experiences a much more severe hurricane season during La Nina because the shift in the jet stream produces greater atmospheric instability in the South Atlantic. But the Pacific Basin actually sees fewer hurricanes, a sign of how drastically different these regional effects can be. Just don't get too complacent, Pacific dwellers. El Nino has the opposite effect as La Nina. Meanwhile, in Pacific coastal South America, you won't see the warm Christmas-time waters that once prompted fishermen to dub it El Nino de la Navidad. Indeed, there is a reason why fishermen once called La Nina El Viejo, or the Old Man. During La Nina, the weather in Peru and Chile turns colder and drier, sometimes producing severe periods of drought. Brazil's north, on the other hand, becomes wetter during the months from December to February, and the lowlands of Bolivia can receive catastrophic flooding. In Africa, the conditions in La Nina years are basically the reverse of what they are during El Nino. East Africa tends to experience drier than average conditions, whereas the south tends to be wetter than average. So, where are we now in the El Nino Southern Oscillation cycle? As of the making of this video, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, has declared an end to a lengthy 1.5-year La Nina. They concluded this based on measuring the difference in surface atmospheric pressure in the western and eastern Pacific, a metric known as the Equatorial Southern Oscillation Index, or EXOR. The last reading of the Equatorial Southern Oscillation Index was just 0.1, down from 1 a year ago, meaning conditions have returned pretty much normal. It is still early to say anything definitive, but there are already indications that an El Nino will occur later in 2023. Currently, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is forecasting a 60% chance that El Nino sets in by autumn. This would have major ramifications, and India is already warning its citizens of potential drought conditions. There is another reason to expect an El Nino in 2023, albeit based purely on past experience. Since we started tracking in the 1950s, as there has never been more than a 4-year period without an El Nino event, so if there is not one in 2023, it would mark the first 5-year gap without one. For me, this is an excellent example of how studying climate cycles can help us prepare and foster human survival, not just on this world, but potentially on other worlds too. Because one of the fascinating aspects of the El Nino Southern Oscillation is the level of insight we gain from it into Earth's complex climate systems. Understanding the interconnectivity of our own planet's climate will be crucial if we ever want to settle on other planets or even terraform. If humans eventually undertake the huge task of terraforming Mars, Mercury, Venus or the Moon, or perhaps even an exoplanet in some other part of the Milky Way galaxy, our success will likely depend on our ability to understand the various inputs and feedback loops that intricately interlink climate systems and biospheres. That day may seem far off, but it is not too early to start dreaming. So, there we have it, an in-depth primer on the El Nino Southern Oscillation. The ENSO can be a very destructive cycle for our planet's animal and human populations, but life is nothing if not adaptable. Likelier than not, 2023 will add another piece to the growing body of documentation about these events. How has El Nino or La Nina affected you? Have you noticed any interesting changes in your part of the world? I would love to hear about it in the comments. As I was researching for this video, it seemed like a good idea to me to brush up on my knowledge of weather systems. I hope it will increase the understanding of you too about weather system. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon to get the notification about my next interesting video on the Famous Fact channel. All the best and see you next time.